Well, hello. Thanks for coming back to check out another video. So, we are here today to sit down and do our first update to pan those eyeshadows. I'm super excited. I just absolutely love this project pan. Before we get into this, I do just want to say this was created by Alexi. I always make sure to have her channel linked in my description box. Even though she's not currently posting any content, she does have a ton of playlists available, and so you can go back and binge watch her older videos and her older playlists where she's doing pan those eyeshadows. This has really taken on a life of its own, and I feel like everyone does this project pan in a little bit of a different way. So this year, Laney came up with 100 prompts, and she randomizes her prompt, gets that, and that is how she picks out her eyeshadow. I just absolutely fell in love with that because I like the randomization that this gives you. I feel like by randomizing all of these eyeshadows, it really forces you to come up with like some creative looks, especially if you want to incorporate a lot of these shades into like one eye look. However, I don't like the entire randomness of it, of like your whole collection. So I like that with Laney's prompts, you're still randomizing it, like you don't know what you're getting, but you do still have a little bit of that control, and you can pick out the shades that really kind of like match what you're feeling, you know? So, along with leaving Alexi listed down in my description box, I will also leave Laney, her playlist, things like that. And I think that's all of like the introduction piece that we need to do so we can get right on into this update. Okay, so the first thing we will talk about is bonus pans. Now, bonus pans for me are eyeshadow pans that I have hit within the month, and these pans of eyeshadows were not ones that I was actually working on within a project, so they were just more on like that organic usage kind of side, you know? So the first one that we will talk about comes from my Natasha Denona Zendo palette. This is super reflective, and I feel like the ring light is going to wash it out, so I'll probably just throw up a picture on the side for you guys. But I did manage to hit pan in the shade Breath, which is just a really pretty, like, minty pastel kind of shade. And I know typically I've told you guys like, oh, I don't really like pastel shades, but for whatever reason I really love minty eyeshadows. I feel like those do not wash me out or make me look sickly, and I love my greens, so of course it makes sense that I would love minty eyeshadows, and did manage to hit pan on this shade from the Zendo palette. Now that shade Breath is one of her cream to powder shades, so I do feel like it was a little bit easier to hit pan on that shade than some of her like standard matte shades that she has in her palettes. So the second bonus pan that I would like to show you, I have to cover up one shade because it comes from my Unzai Hella palette that they did in collaboration with Angelica Nyqvist. Now we are working on a shadow. It's the shade River down here within this project pan, so that's why I'm covering that one up. But I did manage to hit pan on this Decay shade up here, which is a great like gray kind of brown shade. It has like a lot of mustardiness to it. I absolutely love using that in looks like in my crease, in my outer V, on my lower lash line, things like that. But I also really love it as an eyebrow shade. So I think you'll notice that the pan shape is more of like a linear shape rather than like a standard circle, which is typically what you see when people hit pan in like an eyeshadow. So I do use an angled brush for this because I am most of the time using it in my eyebrows. So that's why the pan shape is that way. But yes, 2 bonus pans in total to show you this month. And so hopefully on the screen I have left like my pan percentage and things like that. Now I have hit more pans than just these 2 within my collection, but these are the only 2 that I can show you right now without giving away any spoilers. Okay, so now that we have gotten the bonus pans out of the way, we can get on into this update. So I'm going to first talk about eyeshadows that we have hit pan on and that get to roll out. So I do have one shadow that I managed to hit pan on within this past month. So it does come from the Hella palette. It is the shade River down here. This is just such a pretty multi-chrome eyeshadow. It does have a darker base to it. I would say it's more of like a blue-purple base, but then it has like some green and silver and pink shifts to it, and it is just so pretty, so unique. It's one of those shadows that depending on what you pair it with, more of that shift is going to come out. So I do have River on as my lid shade today, and as you can see, I've paired it with some more like pinky kind of like blue purpley shades, so I feel like more of that blueness comes out. I have paired it with, let's see, more monochromatic type blue looks. Like I used it with like my BH Cosmetics Blueberry Muffin, and then I feel like a lot of that blue really came out in that. We'll get into eye looks and things like that later, but yeah, just know that this was the shadow that I believe I reached for the most out of the 6 that are in this project right now. And it's just because I feel like so creatively inspired, not just from this palette, but with that river shade just in particular. I feel like the river shade is hands down one of my favorite eyeshadows just across the board within my whole collection. So I'm really happy to now have 2 pans of eyeshadow within my Hella palette. Okay, so let's talk about the 5 remaining eyeshadows that are going to be staying in for this next month, and then we will roll in our new shade. So the first one we will talk about comes from BH Cosmetics. This was the Opal for October palette. So I rolled in the shade Personable, which is the minty like shimmer green shade down here. Absolutely fell in love with this shade, with this formula. I mean, this was a palette that I had used before within my collection, but just having it out like in my vanity and using it a bit more just really reiterates that I do really like the birthstone formula. Now, not all of the birthstone palettes that I had were hits, but this one did happen to be one, even though it is more on the pastel side of things. One way that I really loved using this Personable shade was mixing it with berries. I just felt like that was such a fun color combination. And then I did mix it in with some blue, like darker blue shadows. I think I have a picture of that to show you guys. Such a pretty pairing. Like, if you have not paired minty shimmer shades with either berries or blues, highly recommend it. Okay, so up next, another BH Cosmetics palette. I do own a lot of BH Cosmetics, and they are highly featured in this current lineup of shades. So this is the Mimosa palette. So the shadow that we got in here that we were working on is the shade Pop. Now, this was one of my more underutilized shades. However, I did find a eye look that I really enjoyed using this with, and it incorporated some of the brown shadows that are in another palette that's in here that we'll get to. So I really expect to kick up my usages on this. I feel like this is a really pretty pink shade that has like a lot of peachy gold shift to it. So I just really, I do enjoy it. I enjoy pairing it with pinks, but I really like to kick it up and kind of like see what else I can pair it with, because to me those types of pinky lid shades are on the more neutral side of things because I'm just super comfortable like wearing them. So I want to try to like force myself to think of it in like more creative ways than just pairing it with like standard brown shades. Okay, so we have 2 shadows that we are pulling out from the Sugar Cone palette. Now, this palette is tightly pressed. The formula is so lovely from BH Cosmetics. I really think that the hype that the Sweet Shop palette got was well deserved. But like I said, they're very tightly pressed. So I don't know how long it's going to take to hit pan on this. The 2 shadows that we have in here are the shades Delicious, which is a matte kind of mid-tone brown shade, and then the shade Cookie Dough, which is the lightest shimmer shade up here. So as you can see from the pictures, the pans of these have like the little waffle cone imprinting on them, and that Delicious shade, that waffle cone imprinting is still very much present. Like, I haven't even managed to wear that away yet. And with the Cookie Dough shade too, I think you can see like I've managed to wear that away a little bit more because the shimmer shadows are not as tightly pressed as the matte shadows. But I do think that these are 2 shades that are going to be in here for quite some time. I do reserve the right, I guess I should have said this in the introduction piece, but one of my rules has always been that if I feel like I've dedicated a lot of usage to an eyeshadow and I don't think I'm going to hit pan on it, I can roll that shadow out. However, I can't roll the prompt out. I have to keep the prompt in and just pick a different shade to go with the prompt, because my end game is not only eyeshadow pans like to hit, but to work through all 100 prompts. So I'm only bringing that up because I'm not ready to roll this out. I don't have a lot of uses on either one of these 2 shades. However, I just feel like since they are so tightly pressed, hitting pan might not be our option. Okay, so then the last shade to talk about comes from my Nomad Cosmetics Haunted Europe palette. So I think the prompt for this was like a gray silver shimmer shade. So I went with something that was more on the like charcoal side of things. I have the shade the Catacombs, and so this is a really pretty shade actually. I really did enjoy using this as a lid shade. What I did do for one look that I will show you is I did put down the Catacombs as my entire lid shade, and then I used River from the Hella palette and put that on like the first half of my inner lid to really brighten things up. Really love that pairing and color combination. However, the most ways that I have been using the Catacombs in this past rotation is just as a lower lash line shade. That's how I have it on today in today's eye look. I do want to try to force myself to be a little bit more adventurous with this shade in particular too, and not just solely use it as a lower lash line shade and hit pan on it that way. Like, I just feel like this palette has I don't know, it has a really interesting like grungy color story, and there's a lot left to explore with this palette. So that is all of the 5 eyeshadows that we have been working on. Let me grab my phone so that we can go over some looks first. Okay, I'm just realizing that I never put up a picture of our color story of all 6 of these shades together, so hopefully that's what I can insert for you here. And I'm sure you've noticed I had 5 shimmer shades and 1 matte shade. I do think it's a lot easier to hit pan for me personally on shimmer shades than it is matte shades. I'm going to try to not always pick the shimmer shade, but I am much more drawn to shimmer shades. I just love the sparkle and like the interestingness that they bring to an eye look. So I do know some of Laney's prompts though are specifically related to matte eyeshadows, so it's not like I'm always going to have the option to pick a shimmer shade. But either way, that is the color story that we were working on. So now let's get into some eye looks. Okay, so the first eye look that you were seeing is one that I referenced back in the introduction, where I paired like the minty personable shade from the Opal palette with some darker blue shades. I think I wore this in 1 or 2 videos, so I'm sure that you saw it like live in action. Really did enjoy pairing this together, and since we are very much in the winter season now, I know technically it's still fall, but it is currently 26 degrees here. So for all of my friends across the pond, that is -3 degrees Celsius. We have skipped fall. We are just into winter now. And so I'm really like feeling wearing like the icy blue shades. So I'm happy to have found like a color combination with the mint shadow that I really did enjoy and can pull that and incorporate that more into this winter season. Okay, so the next eye look was one of my favorite eye looks that I did. So this was using the River shade from the Hella palette, as well as some shadows from the Haunted Europe palette, including the Catacombs, which is the shade that we are working on here. But I just love that the, let's see, it's the Black Forest shade from Haunted Europe. It looks like a black shadow in the pan when you look at it, but it definitely has much more of like a blueness to it with like a hint of purple. And so I feel like that, having that, and it's what's in my outer V here, and then using the, I think it's the Brand Castle shade, is a little bit more of like a cool tone kind of gray purple shade to blend it out. Pairing that with the River shade, I think you can see what I mean. Like much more of that like pinky purpleness of that multi-chrome shadow does come out in this eye look, as opposed to like other eye looks that you will see with it. Okay, so up next is the monochromatic, more like blue type of eye look that I referenced. So again, River is my lid shade, and then I used a bunch of the shadows from the BH Cosmetics Blueberry Muffin palette, and I really just loved how this turned out. And as you can see, it's still River, but comparing that to our last picture, like it looks like a totally different shimmer shade on my lids, because more of that blueness is coming out since I have paired it solely with like blue shades in this eye look. Okay, so then the final one that I will show you, I really love the grunginess of this. I did this eye look, I think twice maybe, but I took a lot of like mustardy green type of shades, put those in my crease. Then like I said, I put Catacomb all over my lid shade, or all over my lid space. And so it was a little bit too dark for me though to use it straight up as just an all over lid shade. I felt like my eyes looked really closed off. So I did take that River shade and put that on like the inner half of my lid, like I said. And I really feel like that made the Catacombs retain a lot of its darkness, but it also helped to open up my eyes and not make them seem as closed off. And it added a lot of nice shimmer to it. So I really did enjoy that pairing. I would like to try using the Catacombs much like that, like in this eye look, as an all over the lid shade, and using some of my other like topper shadows or some of the other like multi-chrome shadows that I have within my collection on like the inner half like I did, and just see how like I play around with it that way. So that is all of the eye looks that I have to share with you. Let me know down below which one ended up being your favorite eye look. Okay, so I have Pretty Random pulled up on my phone, and I have the minimum set to 1 and the maximum set to 96. So we are just going to randomize one number together, and we get the number 63. So I'm going to pull this up on the spreadsheet, see what prompt this corresponds to, and go pick out my eyeshadow, and I will be back to share all of that with you. Okay, so that took a little bit longer than I want to admit to you. So prompt 63 corresponded to an eyeshadow that starts with the letter P, and I had maybe 5 that I found, but I was like, I don't know, because I'm trying to make a more cohesive color story. So instead, I went with a palette where it was like, you know what, this palette is such a wintry vibes kind of palette that I really do want to reach for this palette more in the winter season. So let's just pull that out. So it's a BH Cosmetics palette. I promise the next update, the next time we get to roll in shadows, I will strive to not make it a BH Cosmetics palette. So I did find a pea shade within the Passion in Paris palette, and it is a shade that I really do love and enjoy. So it is the shade down here, this kind of matte red shade. It's more on the like cooler berry side of things rather than the warmer tone side of things, which I feel like when we get matte red shades, they do tend to be on the warmer side. So it is the shade Pompidou. I absolutely love this, putting this in my outer V, blowing this out in my crease. Like, it's just so pretty, so fun, so easy to work with. So I do already have like a little bit of a dip on this shade, but like I said, I really want to try to strive to pull in more shadows from this palette as a whole, reach for this palette. And I feel like this matte red shade will be a good addition into the rest of the lineup that we have within here. So right now I'd like to pop in a picture of our new color story. So now we have 2 matte shades that we are working on and 4 shimmer shades. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this. I appreciate you sticking around and making it until the end. I hope you're having a good day, a good night, or a good whatever. And I will catch you in the next one. Bye.